like, I've been living beneath the poverty level for all of my adult life. And I was deeply humiliated by, like, so anxious about money and so humiliated by my poverty that, I would go out to dinner. People from college, people from that I was friends with would ask me out to dinner. And I would always be in like a full on anxiety attack about like, how was I going to pay for like a simple restaurant meal out? I got really curious. I was like, maybe there's some part of me that desires this, right? Because I was familiar with this idea that we can attract into our lives what we desire. And I was familiar with the notion that we have an unconscious and we have desires that we are completely unconscious of, that are outside of any ordinary day to day eco awareness. I was doing the work with Byron Katie on my beliefs that, somebody should want to pay me $1,000 an hour for coaching. So I was like, is that true? And I absolutely know that it's true. How do I react when I believe that thought? Who would I be without that thought? Turn around the thought to the opposite. So I turned it around to nobody should ever want to pay me anything, ever. And I felt this total like zing throughout my body that was like, yes. And I was like, whoa, okay, Carolyn, clearly you like this.
The container is now open. This episode is an extremely exciting moment for the container. We come back from our break to bring you the first in our series of Circling in the Beyond. It all starts with Carolyn Lovewell, formerly Carolyn Elliot. She wrote Existential Kink, which is by far the single best shadow work process, I think, ever, maybe. We hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoyed making these awesome episodes. Thank you so much for being with us. Here's the interview. Carolyn, Carolyn Lovewell, welcome to the container.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan and Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Yes, this started our relationship to your work with Existential Kink started several months ago now, February or March. And in that time, I have found the work to be the single best shadow process and a really, really profound spiritual offering for us that, as we were just talking before the episode, like, has been really fundamental to our spiritual progress since encountering it. And like a lot of the best spiritual medicine, I think it gives us the eternally controversial proposition that we are actually in control. Whether we know it or not, we are in control. And if we knew how we are in control, we could be consciously in control of and like you can, and that's a ride that takes you from making more money and having more better sex to reaching God consciousness. So it's like thank you very much for Existential Kink. And I would love to open it up by I guess like getting a sense of like your journey to Existential Kink, or like how did you pop and like get this transmission?
Yes, well, thank you. I will answer that question. And first of all, I just wanted to say thank you both so much for receiving the spiritual teaching and energy behind Existential Kink, because it's definitely in the book, but I feel like some people read it and they're just like, oh, cool. I don't know. They're just like, kinky fun, get what I want. But there is God consciousness absolutely available through this route. So I'm glad that that has touched you. How did I come into it? Ooh, okay, well, The time when I came up with existential kink, I was in a sex cult. It was the best of cults. It was the worst of cults. It's called One Taste. There's Netflix documentaries about it now. I was very much on the provincial, peripheral fringes of the cult. I was not in the where all the crimes were going down. Um, we were, and that is its own little magical story, how we got to have a One Taste outpost in Pittsburgh. But One Taste is centered on orgasmic meditation, which was a practice that entailed a sort of 15-minute, very regimented procedure of a stroker stroking a woman's clitoris. And there were gloves involved and a specific kind of lube and a timer and a whole setup. And I was living in an orgasmic meditation house, weirdly, just across the street from where I live now. Like before we bought this house where I live now, I traveled all around the world and I ended up in the same patch of grass, but it seems to be a magical spot for me. So I was living in a group house right across the street, and I was doing this orgasmic meditation practice every day, twice a day. So I was very in touch with my clitoris. I was very in touch with like sexual energy in my body. I was having very like psychedelic experiences, as you might imagine, with all that Shakti orgasmic energy. I was learning really about how the erotic Kundalini, whatever, so many synonyms for it, Kundalini energy, orgasm energy, is an endogenous psychedelic, and that's really fun. And I had, there's this idea in the orgasmic meditation community that you could find a way to get off on any stroke. So usually there'd be a range of strokes that women would have a particular preference for. And then outside of that range, it would be uncomfortable. And the invitation in the practice was to see if you can open up outside of your usual range and let down your preferences and just move into a wider degree of approval for a wider array of sensation. So I was actively experimenting with that. And there was also present in the orgasmic meditation movement this idea that you can get off on every stroke and everything in life is a stroke. And there were not many people I knew who really could do that, except my friend Leslie. So my friend Leslie has gone on, he runs a kink institute called the Light Dark Institute. He's a far out guy. And I remember I'd be hanging out with Leslie and he'd be like crying. And I'd be like, oh, Leslie, are you okay? Like, I'm so amazing. And I would be like, what? And he'd be like, I'm completely humiliated. And it feels so good. He was just this like, he's just a really wild genius who of inhabiting his full range of emotions and able to find pleasure in it, find far out kinky pleasure in it. So I was in this context, and I had also been through graduate school, and I got my graduate degree in critical and cultural studies, which entailed reading a whole lot of psychology and history and philosophy. So I had read a lot of Freud and Jung and Emerson and Heidegger and William James, and had also been participating in a New Thought church, a unity church. So they're sort of all about, the law of attraction and how you create your own reality. And I always liked New Thought teachings and law of attraction teachings because, boy, I sure wanted to figure out how to experience a better reality. But they always just kind of struck me as like a little bit kind of too saccharine sweet. Like I could never completely get down with it. I was always just sort of a broody, melancholy kind of being. I really struggled with depression early in my life. Yeah, so in my 20s, I was in this sex cult. I was just sort of just skating by, making enough money to live. At various points, I'd been couch surfing and dumpster diving. Now I was living in this group house. And I was working as a creativity coach. So I'd written a book called Awaken Your Genius, which is sort of a cult creativity favorite. I was doing creativity coaching and I was earning about $100 an hour as a coach. And I knew of people in the orgasmic meditation movement who were earning $1,000 an hour as a coach, which blew my mind because I'm from blue collar Pittsburgh, where the most money an hour I'd ever heard of anybody making was like, yeah, a therapist for like $100 an hour, or an electrician for whatever, $50. I don't even know. I just $1,000 an hour, that just was not real. But I knew people who were doing it, and I was wildly envious of this. And of course, I like I've been living beneath the poverty level for all of my adult life. I've been a PhD student and then skating by. And I was deeply humiliated, but like so anxious about money and so humiliated by my poverty that, I would go out to dinner. People from college, people from that I was friends with would ask me out to dinner. And I would always be in like a full on anxiety attack about like, how was I going to pay for like a simple restaurant meal out? Like, ugh. And the fact that they seemed to be able to handle it just fine. I could not. And anyways, I got really curious. I was like, maybe there's some part of me that desires this, right? Because I was familiar with this idea that we can attract into our lives what we desire. And I was familiar with the notion that we have an unconscious and we have desires that we are completely unconscious of, that are outside of any ordinary day to day ego awareness. And I just started to view, I was like, maybe some part of me that I'm completely unconscious of desires this condition of poverty. And my conscious mind really wanted riches and luxury. I was sure about that. I was sure that I did not want what I was experiencing, the scraping by and the humiliation and the anxiety about paying the rent. But I was just like, maybe some part of me is into it, and maybe it's a stroke that life is giving me. And maybe it's possible for me to get off on this stroke because I knew from the orgasmic meditation practice that I was able to expand my range of different kinds of strokes, different kind of sensations that I could open up to. And instead of having them like close me down and be like, no, don't do that, I could open up and be like, yes, sure, let's do this now. So I was doing the work with Byron Katie on my beliefs that, somebody should want to pay me $1,000 an hour for coaching. And of course, with the work of Byron Katie, you ask questions and then you turn it around. So I was like, is that true? Can I absolutely know that it's true? How do I react when I believe that thought? Who would I be without that thought? Turn around the thought to the opposite. So I turned it around to nobody should ever want to pay me anything, ever. And I felt this total like zing throughout my body that was like, yes. And I was like, whoa, okay, Carolyn, clearly you like this. Clearly you really do. And obviously, if you are this turned on about nobody ever wanting to pay you for anything, obviously that has something to do with why nobody is paying you for anything. Like, there's and I was so and also it was fun because in the orgasmic meditation movement, people talked about magic a lot. Nicole Daedone, who started the movement, she's a deep magician for sure. She's a very wily trickster bodhisattva, bless her. I've learned so much from her. And she people would talk about witchcraft and being witches. And I remember one day I was with my friends. We were supposed to be going to California for some training. And all of the tires on the car, I didn't want to go. I was like, oh, I hate this. Why am I doing this? Why am I going out to California again? I can't afford this. Anyways, all of the tires went out on our way to the airport. They just, and everybody in the car was like, Carolyn, you did that. And, it was just really funny because people would they would, tease me about this, about my witchy powers. And to to the point that I was like, I started to accept this, and I was like, well, if I can blow out all the tires on the car with my unconscious desires, maybe I could create good things in my life if I could find a way to connect with this power. Um, so so I found that zing, and I realized, wow, this is a part of me. This pleasure in not being valued is a part of who I am, and I don't have a way to change it. It's just there, and it's really strong. And I had the idea. I was like, well, how about I just open up to this pleasure? How about I just let myself feel it fully since it's already here? Of course, I had all these voices in my mind like, well, that's really fucked up. Nobody should want to be poor. Like, what? And I had to really make space for myself and really let myself know. And I still tell this to myself whenever I do the existential kink practice, which is, Carolyn, nobody else needs to understand this about you. Nobody else needs to approve of it. Nobody else needs to get it. You're just allowed to be you, and you're allowed to have pleasure in what you have pleasure in. So I started working with this idea, and I found very soon that I could actually um, really have a deep orgasmic bliss experience just thinking about all of the bills that I couldn't pay and all of the things that, um, these experiences of not knowing what to do and getting the bill at dinner, all of this stuff. I was like, wow, I can really, I am not a pathetic little person. I'm a person who's getting exactly what she wants. That's what's happening. And it was just like this huge switch in my identity where instead of seeing myself as some put upon victim, I saw myself as a deeply fulfilled person. And it seemed like with that, very quickly, there were ideas that started to come to me that previously I had just not been able to see. I had not, they were just out of the range of my identity. And they were like really simple things, like I could start an email list and I could make offers to my email list. Like that's internet marketing 101. And I had just not been able to do that. But after this shift in my identity that came through existential kink practice, I found myself very easily able to do that. And within, it was like 2 or 3 months, instead of making like $1,000 a month, I was making $10,000 a month. And I was like, screw you guys, I'm moving to Bali, peace. And I just like rolled on out. And I mean, bless you guys. I love you. I'm moving to Bali, but also screw you. There was a very big attitude of screw you, Pittsburgh, right then in my life. Because I was also in an abusive relationship, which I also disentangled myself from with an existential kink practice. Because I was in this crazy relationship with this guy who was like bonkers jealous, like uh and he threw a ceramic coffee mug at my head once, and then I would break up with him, and then I would get bored and I would call him up again. I mean, he didn't have me tied to a radiator. Like I was the lunatic who kept calling him. And uh and anyways, I could not disentangle myself from that until I admitted to myself that there was a part of me, because I was like, oh, I hate how controlling he is. What the fuck is the matter with him? Ooh, I hate this. And I was like, no, I love it. I love that he's obsessed with me. Lord, I love that so much. I mean, how could I not? All I've ever wanted is for somebody to be obsessed with me, and he's completely obsessed with me. So I had to admit to myself that like that was also a really big fulfillment, and I had to allow myself to completely consciously enjoy that fulfillment, even though I had so much shame about being in this abusive, messed up relationship. And then I found myself able to get free of it. So that was how existential kink started for me. And as I was traveling the world and writing to my email list, I was like, hey, you can do this thing. I did it and it changed my life completely in a couple of months. Maybe you'd like to learn about it. And there was a huge response. I was really kind of surprised to find out that people were able to pretty easily understand this weird idea. And because, when I first realized that I was turned on by being poor, I was like, wow, Carolyn, you don't just have a bedroom kink, you have an existential kink that affects your entire life. This is pretty intense. Anyways, I was just amazed that there were lots of people who were also able to very rapidly change their whole experience of life using this teaching. And it was very interesting because as I got more, I started, what do I say, researching things connected to it. And of course, the founding fathers of psychotherapy knew all about this. Freud, Adler, Jung all wrote about unconscious desires. And I was even reading this biography of Freud once. It's a famous biography by Peter Gay. And there was a section in there, I wish I had the quotation, I should have saved it, dig it up sometime, where it talks about how Freud used to just straight up tell people, like, this thing in your life that you hate, you are really into that. There's a part of, I know you don't believe me, there's a part of you that really wants that. But people would get so offended when he would tell them. And they'd fire him and everything. So he just started being like, all right, well, let's look at your dreams, because your dreams are pointing out to you that you're really into this thing that you say that you hate. And if your own dream is telling it to you and it's not me, then maybe you'll be able to accept it and understand it. And he found out that that worked. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because obviously it's a very offensive thing. If somebody is really in a situation that they don't like and you come along like a complete asshole and you're like, by the way, you clearly are really into this. Like, nobody wants to hear that. They get offended. So, but I just decided to tell the whole world that. I'm like, look, don't take it personal. It's all of us, okay? And I really feel that that's true. In my experience, it's certainly true. So, anyways, that's my big spiel. I answered one question, I think.
There are 3 ways you can support the container in bringing you more content on circling and the beyond, where we explore that mysterious occult realm that we're all splashing around in even when we don't realize we are. Okay, so how can you help us out? Number 1, if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. That really helps us with the algorithm. If you're listening to this as a podcast, rate, review, share with people who you think would get something out of these conversations. But finally, the best way you can support us is by becoming a patron at patreon.com/thecontainer. When you support us with small monthly donations, you get access to all of the premium only episodes, which right now is our deep dive into the Tao Te Ching called The Way That Can Be Told. Thank you so much for supporting us in any way that you can, in whatever way feels right now. With that, back to the interview with Carolyn Lovewell.
I just love listening. I mean, you're telling the story so beautifully, and I was just enthralled at every moment of it, and so thank you. And just to kind of off of what you just said with the feeling of offense, it's fun. It's so funny how even after learning the process and doing the practice, like there are times where Jonathan and I will say, oh, maybe this is something, like we'll just suggest. And there's been times where he suggested it to me. I'm like, how dare he suggest it? Like, and then I'm over here like, actually though, I kind of do love it. But it does feel, it still is this, it's like a kind of a gut punch. And I was actually just recently, we were in a setting with a circle. We were circling, And there was someone who was going through something, and I was trying to think of how to present, like, or suggest, make the suggestion or nudge in that direction, and I felt trapped. I was like, I don't even know how, what is like the nice way to suggest that. Maybe it's like,
Yeah.
hey, there's this book,
Right.
this is an interesting book, you might like it.
I think that, to me, that's something that Existential Kink does really well as like a framework. Is like, if it's a nerd psychoanalyst with a cigar telling you like you actually like that, it's like, go fuck yourself, you know? But like making it like turning it around and using kink as the frame is such a more fun and playful and like, yeah, it's like sexy and kind of like adventurous and fun. It's like, it doesn't have to be super like, oh wow, there are very dark shadows in me that like this very shameful stuff and I have to do work to process that. And
Right.
it's like, yeah, or you can just start enjoying it right away through this reframe, and then now you're enjoying it, and like now we're moving, and it's like, it doesn't, yeah, it's so. And you, in the book, you take time several times to be like, this isn't about you're to blame for things in your life, it's that you actually have the power to change these things. There's like, yeah, there's so much in us that resists that power though. I mean, I think that's why they like, yeah, I don't know, like people since the Buddha have been saying this and it doesn't, people have found ways to, I don't know, resist it for thousands of years.
Well, yeah, because it's it's funny because uh there's just such deep entertainment in being victimized by things. Like,
Hmm.
I understand if somebody doesn't feel like stepping out of any particular fixation that they have, because Lord, it's fun. Oh my gosh. And it's and stepping out of a particular existential kink fixation, climaxing it, getting off on it, releasing the shame about it so that it changes, opens one up to the unknown. And certainly I understand why, well, humans very commonly fear the unknown. But yeah, it's one of the things that's really fun to me about existential kink and about magic in general is that one can do it as a means of changing one's experience, as um, and there's a deep way in which the practice is an alchemical marriage that uh, connects one to the larger self at the same time that one is, uh, magically changing one's own life. So there's like this dance and this interplay that happens, which I feel like for me, it's been a process of waking up to the way that the divine lover at every moment is touching me in the most exquisite way. And my attitude towards that can be like, no, don't touch me that way. Touch me some other way. Oh, you're doing it wrong. Which
Mm.
is definitely my default attitude. Or my attitude could be like, whoa,
Yeah.
you just, really surrendering. And in that surrendering, it's a deep kind of fascinating paradox, which is that in that surrendering to like my really just like when I stop trying to squirm away and I just sort of like powerlessly, I'm like, well, let's just feel whatever's here and let's feel it with love. Um, that's when the transformation can happen. So that non-resistance is the
A
creative thing.
non-resistance. Yeah. On a physical, that just it's so profoundly impacted me on a somatic and physical level. Um, you know, like from here to here, it's this is where my experience is, and so intense and so detached from thought. Like there aren't thought formations related. It's like I'll go down in to do the practice, but then it's doing me. It's like the work is being done on my body, on the physical plane. Like it's not, it's so cool. It's so magical because I don't have to be thinking. It's like I can start with the thought and then just kind of send it in. And then it's like, okay, we gotcha. And I mean, like, I sometimes wish there was a video camera set up to see like what is happening to my body, what it looks like is happening, what I'm imagining is happening, like from outside looking in my body. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It does so much starts happening. Yeah.
I feel like I cut. You were about to say something too, Jonathan.
Yeah. Well, it connects to this like the talk of how allowing yourself to get off on all of the strokes, like, and you use the divine lover, like as you interact with them, like by the end of that process, it like remakes you in a way. And I really was like almost like talking to myself out loud today when I was rereading this part, excited to get to talk to you. There's like, um, there's this way that EK makes so much more possible in your life, but and you know, a lot of spiritual, I think a lot of good magical practice does do this, where it like you are more powerful and more capable um at the end of it, but you like don't need to be anymore. It's like this fucking weird paradox where like, well, now I'm like, I like where I am now. I don't actually need more now because everything is already okay. There's a really great section in it that I really want to read directly from here in a second, but like, you put it like, if you just do this great bow to your unconscious, your conscious mind does this like humbling bow of just approval, then it's like, whoa, I can live in a world where I'm already okay. And then it's like, yeah, I mean, I could live I could make a lot of money and be jet set, but that was all to feel okay. So if I already feel okay here, you really just need a Bodhi tree to sit under. I mean, at that point, it's like, what are we doing? Like, it's all a lot of stress, to like get the plane tickets and fly around the world, and
Yeah, there's so much rich satisfaction and fulfillment that's always already happening. And I love how you would just put that, Jonathan. Absolutely. It's like we can recognize the fulfillment that's already present. And from that, um, how could it get any better? That's amazing. It's woo. I mean, so yeah, sometimes for me, the initial transformation did have to do with the big change in my money situation, but ultimately what I see it having to do with is really coming in, living from that place of fulfillment and inspiration rather than finding myself and the world to be a shameful, terrible situation that, needed to be fixed.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And one of the reasons, so many reasons I love Existential Kink, but, one of the deep things I've learned from Carl Jung is about inflation. So ego inflation is a thing that most human beings experience at some point in their lives, and it comes from being unconsciously identified with the larger self in the sense of thinking that I should have the powers of the larger self when I don't. So famously, little children are always unconsciously identified with the self. They're ego inflated. Like my 5-year-old daughter, we saw a sign for guitar lessons, and she has a little toy guitar that she bangs on. And I asked her if she wanted guitar lessons, and she was like, "Mom, I'm already too good at guitar."
Yes.
Hell yeah.
And, in her mind, she's a god of music. And, definitely that's completely appropriate for a 5-year-old. And when she, uh, throws her toys and has a tantrum, and I tell her to go to her room and she gets really mad, that anger, it's like the anger of Yahweh. It's like this, how dare you defy my will? It's very intense. And anyways, I think about that a lot, about how pretty much all negativity is an expression of inflation, of like my ego thinking that I should have godlike powers. And if what I want to be happening in any given moment is not happening, then I'm going to feel, I'm going to make a epic biblical storm about it. Like that. One of the things that's fun about existential kink is it's a really deep ego deflation. And it's a really deep means of individuating by coming to understand that really the unconscious is in charge. And the unconscious is part of me. And the unconscious can be in a deep communion with my conscious mind and get fertilized by the desires in my conscious mind. But I am not the master in my own house. My ego is not the master in my own house. It's not my ego who's choosing, what kind of people I'm attracted to, what literally anything, actually. And the more and more I do this practice, the more I'm like, wow, my ego exists purely for the purpose of comedy. That's what it's for. It's to laugh at myself, and that's really the only function that it has. And everything else, is just kind of spontaneously happening. Thoughts arise, intentions arise, emotions arise, and who's doing it? Who's doing the rain and the wind? I'm pretty sure it's the same person, the same divine person. And so I see existential kink as a means of, opening up to just accepting and relaxing into the fact that I'm not the master in my own house, and I might as well get excited for whatever the master in my house is doing, who does not happen to be me, because it's gonna happen anyways. It's happening.
The image that's coming to me in that is like there's this way that like there's the part of the house that the light is on that like quote I am in, and it's like, and then there's this whole dark wing of the house and it's like, okay, I can understand if someone tells me about the unconscious. I can be like, okay, I get that there's like parts of me, and let make it even more basic and materialistic. Like there's probably stuff going on in my brain that my consciousness doesn't know about. So I can accept that. And so I can start treating the unconscious as this like potentially reachable thing that does something like thinking, and it's affecting me. And I can start into working with it, and EK gives me a way to do that using that like orgasmic energy, which is like the to me that's like the electricity humming through all the light bulbs in the universe. It's like, yeah. Yeah, and so like that's giving me access to whatever is in this dark side of the house. But then the more we work in that, the more it's like, oh, that dark side, that might just be the entire universe. Like who knows what the unconscious somewhere in that dark territory is the doorway that's left wide open to God. And then it's like, yeah, so then it becomes, shadow work becomes a way to sort of, move into this, God consciousness. It's a way to interact with it, at least.
Oh,
And
yes.
yeah.
I love that how you say that, Jonathan. That's so true. I like to say shadow work leads to God work. And that's very true in my experience. And in Sleepover Mystery School and in my online courses, we do a lot of theurgy. So theurgy literally means God working. And the idea with theurgy is that it's ritual enactment of the actions of the creator. So it's literally, you know, identifying and participating with the actions that the creator does. And it's a very powerful means of expanding consciousness also. And I feel like existential kink and theurgy really go together very well. And in fact, I don't know, I'll just mention this. I've also discovered that existential kink really completely fulfills the instructions of Thelema and Aleister Crowley in a really deep way. So I'll just throw that out in case there's any super occult nerds listening and might possibly care about that. That existential kink is a way of crossing the abyss. It's a way of surrendering one's self into the holy grail of Babylon, the Great Mother, and being transformed. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Damn, that's getting me excited as hell to talk about the mystery tradition that you've created. And like before we do that, I imagine we'll end the episode around here. So for the EK, and then save the rest for the next episode. But I really feel called to read this section. I want to read it out loud and put it into the room. And the reason I really want to read it is that the first time I read it earlier this year, the image stuck with me, and it was really striking and kind of haunted me. And then Sai and I entered into a ceremony recently where I feel like then I like experienced it on this cosmic level in a way.
Yeah.
And I know that like part of what made that possible, which was like maybe the peak spiritual experience, like at least one of the major ingredients was these two paragraphs. And like there's a lot of framework around that, I realized. It wasn't just you sitting down to write these two paragraphs, but I think that this is really stunning spiritual work here. And it's in your step 6 of the EK system. And this is the moment where you actually get to meet your shadow and what your consciousness does. So it is through gratitude, deep receiving, and orgasmically enjoying the result you've created unconsciously that you make space for your conscious and unconscious minds to sexually, magically merge, fertilize each other, and eventually give birth to a new upward spiral of positive synchronicity in your life. In this moment of the conscious mind humbly bowing to the desires of the unconscious, your conscious mind and your unconscious mind can finally meet. In this moment of meeting, your unconscious becomes fertilized with the inspirations and ideals of your conscious mind. Your conscious mind befriends your previously unconscious pleasures, and your unconscious mind reciprocates. This is the alchemy, the moment of transmutation. That is the good shit. That is the fish scale. That is the China White of magic this generation.
Oh my goodness. Oh, let's see. I agree. I'm so glad you have the good taste.
That is, I didn't even know that you were gonna read that. And I like my whole body is reacting to hearing that and thinking about the experience we had in this room just about a month ago. And yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, like going back to that physical experience, and that there was this, because it was like both of our essences were like experiencing this kind of twisting,
Caduceus, like interwrapping.
yeah, and that it was that constriction and then resisting, like or non-resisting, and then back into the constriction and then the non-resisting. I mean, we weren't having sex, but it was like the greatest sex we've ever had, like when
Right.
we're having intercourse.
It was the theurgy. It was like you were saying, it's theurgy of how yin and yang makes the world happen.
Whoa, dude.
Like that is how the dual reality, like dualistic reality is made. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Well said. Absolutely. That is precisely so.
The container is now closed. That is Carolyn Lovewell. People, what a discussion. I was feeling so privileged to be sitting there talking with a spiritual thinker at the level of the writer of Existential Kink. Next week, we bring you another discussion with her, this time on the history of the Western esoteric tradition and why it's so important that Carolyn Lovewell has started a mystery school. And remember, if you want to see our enormous series, The Way That Can Be Told, where we learn about circling by circling the Tao Te Ching, you have to follow us on Patreon. Patreon.com/thecontainer. Support us with small monthly donations, and you get these incredible episodes where Sai and I dive deep into the Tao. With that, I would just like to say it's so wonderful to be back. We had such a wonderful time in Europe. First, we went to the International Transformational Connection Festival. And then we got to spend time in Paris looking at their amazing art in cathedrals. It was just such a great, inspiring time of renewal. Shout out to Circling Europe. Shout out to all the friends that we made there. And on that note, we have a nice way of closing. Keep it namaste.